The world above was calm, almost deceptively peaceful. Fields stretched endlessly under the gray European sky, villages stood quiet, and forests whispered with the wind. But miles beneath the earth, hidden away from sunlight and time, something extraordinary lay buried, a vast network of tunnels connecting countries, cultures, and perhaps even civilizations that history had long forgotten. It began in Bavaria, Germany. A farmer plowing his land struck something hard beneath the soil, a smooth slab of stone. When archaeologists arrived, they uncovered not a grave or ruins, but a narrow tunnel leading downward. The entrance was barely wide enough for a grown man to squeeze through. The air that escaped was cool, heavy, and smelled of wet stone and something ancient, something that had not been disturbed for thousands of years. Dr. Helena Krauss, a leading archaeologist known for her obsession with prehistoric mysteries, led the initial exploration. Her colleagues called her the woman who listens to the earth. She believed that every civilization, no matter how old, left its story buried in the ground, a story told not in words but in silence and stone. When she descended into the Bavarian tunnel for the first time, she felt that silence pressing around her, like a living thing. The passage stretched endlessly, carved with impossible precision. The walls bore faint tool marks, yet the craftsmanship was astonishing: straight lines, sharp corners, and smooth surfaces that shimmered faintly under torchlight. "It's as if they had machines," Helena murmured, her voice echoing softly down the stone corridor. But the tunnel was far older than the invention of any metal tool. Carbon dating from nearby artifacts suggested it was at least 10,000 years old, possibly older than Stonehenge, older than the Egyptian pyramids, older even than recorded civilization itself. Within weeks, similar discoveries followed, one in Scotland, another in Austria, then Turkey, and finally, Spain. Each site revealed the same eerie architecture: narrow, winding tunnels carved with identical precision, at nearly the same depth underground. As researchers compared notes, an impossible truth began to emerge: these tunnels seemed connected, forming a massive subterranean network that spanned the entire European continent. Over 10,000 miles of passageways linked ancient lands, as though prehistoric people had shared a singular, coordinated vision. Why? No one could answer. Some theorized they were trade routes, safe from predators or weather. Others believed they were escape tunnels built during an ancient cataclysm, perhaps the aftermath of a comet impact or the Great Flood myths spoken of in nearly every early culture. But Helena suspected something deeper. She noticed recurring patterns carved into the tunnel walls: spirals, concentric circles, and strange triangular symbols that seemed almost mathematical. These markings repeated every few miles, as if part of a coded map. Helena's research team, armed with drones and 3D scanners, began documenting every inch. Yet, the deeper they explored, the more unsettling the findings became. There were no signs of living quarters, food storage, or tools typically associated with human habitation. These tunnels weren't meant for living, they were meant for passage, and perhaps for hiding something. One evening, as Helena reviewed footage in her tent, a junior archaeologist named Marco rushed in, pale and trembling. "You need to see this," he stammered, thrusting a flashlight toward her. Deep in one of the side tunnels, they had uncovered a sealed stone doorway, perfectly fitted, as though cut with a precision laser. Across its surface ran a series of unfamiliar carvings, a language no one recognized. Helena ran her fingers across the symbols, and for the briefest moment, felt a vibration, faint, but real, thrumming through the stone. "It's hollow behind this wall," Marco whispered. "There's something in there." When the team returned the next morning to open it, the air seemed heavier, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. They used chisels and small drills, careful not to damage whatever lay beyond. Hours later, the final piece of stone broke free with a deep, resonant crack. Instantly, a rush of cold air burst through the opening, stale, ancient, and thick with dust. But mixed within it was something else, a low, rhythmic sound, distant yet distinct. Helena froze. It wasn't wind. It wasn't dripping water. It was footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing from somewhere far beyond the opening. Her team exchanged uneasy glances. "It's probably just air pressure," Marco offered weakly. But Helena's instinct screamed otherwise. She raised her flashlight, peering into the darkness beyond the broken wall. The beam illuminated a narrow staircase spiraling downward, cut from solid rock, perfectly symmetrical, vanishing into blackness. Helena took a breath and whispered to herself, "This isn't just a tunnel. It was a gateway, one that no one had opened for 10,000 years. And whatever had been buried down there, was waiting." The air beyond the stone doorway was colder than ice, heavy and ancient, as though it hadn't been breathed in millennia. "Doctor." Helena Krauss stepped through first, her flashlight beam cutting into the blackness. The narrow passage sloped downward, the walls damp and slick with mineral deposits that glistened like veins of silver. Each step echoed sharply, swallowed by the darkness as if the earth itself were absorbing sound. After 20 meters, the tunnel opened into a vast subterranean chamber, so enormous it defied comprehension. The roof was lost in darkness, and Helena's light barely reached the edges. The ground was covered in smooth stone tiles laid in precise geometric patterns, a spiral that wound inward toward a circular pit in the center. The air felt charged, like the moments before a lightning strike. Helena crouched, tracing the grooves of the spiral with her fingers. The stone was unnaturally smooth, not chiseled, not carved, but melted. "This isn't possible," she murmured. "No Bronze Age culture could have done this." Marco knelt beside her, sweeping dust away with a brush. "It's as if the stone was liquefied and shaped, but by what?" His voice trembled. All around the chamber, massive pillars stood like silent sentinels, each etched with identical symbols, triangles within circles, interlocking spirals, and long lines of unknown script that glowed faintly under ultraviolet light. Helena recognized them. They were the same symbols she had seen across tunnel entrances thousands of miles apart, in Scotland, France, and even Turkey. This wasn't an isolated civilization. Whoever built these tunnels had been connected, unified under one knowledge, one purpose. "Look at this," Marco said, pointing his flashlight toward the chamber's far wall. There, half buried in dust, was an enormous stone slab engraved with a constellation map. Helena's breath caught in her throat. The star patterns didn't match the modern night sky, but when overlaid on ancient astronomical data, they corresponded to the heavens as they would have appeared 12,000 years ago, near the end of the last ice age. Helena's heart raced. That would mean the builders lived during an era when most humans were still hunter-gatherers, before writing, before agriculture, before civilization as we knew it. Yet they had carved tunnels stretching across continents and mapped the stars beneath the Earth. What if these tunnels weren't made for travel? Helena said softly. What if they were built to mirror the sky? The thought was staggering. A civilization that worshipped the heavens from beneath the ground, a world beneath a world, where constellations guided the living instead of the dead. But as they studied the chamber, a darker pattern emerged. Around the edges of the spiral floor lay hundreds of small depressions, circular, blackened with soot. Inside each were fragments of charred bone, their shapes unmistakably human. "Sacrifices," Marco whispered. Helena didn't answer. Her flashlight trembled slightly in her hand as she stepped toward the central pit. It was perfectly round, carved with precision that defied primitive tools. She shone her light down, but the beam was swallowed by endless darkness. The air rising from it was cold, dry, and carried a faint metallic scent. Then she noticed the markings around the rim, spirals intertwined with jagged lines. The pattern was familiar, but it wasn't decorative. It looked like a seal. Helena turned to her team. "These people weren't hiding in the tunnels," she said slowly. "They were trying to seal something inside them." Before anyone could respond, a deep rumble vibrated through the chamber. Dust fell from the unseen ceiling. The instruments on Helena's belt flickered and died. For a moment, total silence, then, from somewhere deep below the pit, came a low, resonant hum. It was rhythmic, pulsing, almost alive, and the sound carried through the floor, up their legs, into their bones. The lights dimmed, their radio receivers buzzed, and Marco's voice cracked with fear. "Helena, what is that?" She couldn't answer. Her heart was pounding, her instinct screaming to leave, yet curiosity rooted her to the spot. She aimed her flashlight again into the pit. For a second, just a heartbeat, she saw something move. A shadow against shadows. A ripple, as if something vast had shifted far below. Helena stumbled backward. "Everyone out," she ordered, her voice sharp now. The hum was growing louder, deeper, vibrating the very air. As the team scrambled back into the tunnel, the sound changed, rhythmic pulses turning into a pattern, like a slow heartbeat. They reached the doorway and sealed it with their equipment as best they could. The noise continued, echoing through the stone like a living pulse. Helena pressed her ear against the wall, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she heard something beneath the sound, a whisper. Not in any human language, but in tones, ancient and deliberate. When they finally emerged from the tunnels hours later, dawn was breaking over the Bavarian hills. The sunlight felt harsh after the weight of the dark. Marco sat on the ground, pale and shaking. "That wasn't air pressure, was it?" he said. Helena didn't answer. She stared back at the entrance, the cold wind brushing her face. Somewhere down there, beneath layers of rock and time, something had moved, something that had been waiting for millennia in silence. And now, it was awake. The team didn't speak for hours after returning to the surface. Their faces were pale, their hands trembling as if they'd just escaped a nightmare. Yet the nightmare wasn't over, it had only just begun. By dawn, the Bavarian government had ordered the tunnels sealed off, citing unstable geological conditions. Helena Krauss tried to protest, but her reports were dismissed. No one wanted to believe that something ancient and alive could be sleeping beneath Europe. Within days, military-grade barriers surrounded the site, and every record of the discovery was quietly removed from public databases. But Helena couldn't rest. The sound, that low, rhythmic hum, haunted her even in her dreams. She'd wake at night hearing it reverberate faintly in her skull, as if the earth beneath her home were breathing. Weeks later, she returned to the site alone. She told no one, not even Marco, who had quit the expedition and left Germany altogether. When she arrived, the excavation zone was abandoned. The equipment was gone, but the entrance to the tunnels had been crudely sealed with concrete. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the gray slab that now covered the doorway she had opened. Her flashlight beam swept across the seal, and there, half buried in the dirt, she saw something new. A symbol. It was crudely scratched into the fresh concrete, a circle with a vertical slit through the center. It was the same mark carved deep into the tunnel walls, the same that she had seen surrounding the pit. Her breath caught in her throat. No one from her team could have drawn it, they hadn't seen this part of the wall clearly before retreating. Someone, or something, had marked it after the site was sealed. Helena set up her camera and began recording everything. She couldn't explain why, some instinct told her that evidence was her only protection now. As she spoke into the lens, her voice shook. "They didn't build these tunnels for safety," she said. "They built them to contain what's underneath. The markings aren't decoration, they're seals." A sudden vibration rippled through the ground. Dust fell from the trees around her. Helena's flashlight flickered. It wasn't an earthquake, the tremor came in a steady rhythm, like a pulse. She turned toward the sealed wall, and for a moment, she swore she saw the concrete shift, just slightly, as though it were flexing from pressure beneath. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to stay. She pressed her ear against the barrier and froze. From behind it, deep and distant, came a sound like breathing, long, slow, patient. Helena stumbled back, whispering, "No, no, that's not possible," but the sound grew louder, more defined. It wasn't just breathing now, it was movement. Something vast was shifting beneath miles of stone. Then, a single knock echoed from behind the concrete. Deliberate, solid, waiting. Helena ran. She didn't look back until she reached her jeep half a mile away. As she drove, she recorded one final message. "To whoever finds this," she said, voice cracking, "seal every entrance. Don't dig. Don't explore. These tunnels weren't meant to connect civilizations, they were built to bury something. And we've woken it." She never returned. Weeks later, a local farmer reported finding her vehicle abandoned at the edge of a forest. The camera was inside, still recording, the battery nearly dead. The footage, later recovered by authorities, showed Helena sitting in the car, trembling, whispering a single word over and over before the video cut to static. The word was, "below." Months passed. Then reports began surfacing across Europe. In Austria, a team of spelunkers exploring an uncharted cave system vanished without a trace. In France, miners claimed to hear distant chanting beneath the earth. And in Scotland, villagers near ancient tunnel entrances described deep, rhythmic vibrations at night, like footsteps echoing far underground. Helena's discovery was erased from the official record. Her research vanished from archives, her name removed from academic databases. But copies of her footage began leaking online, Short clips of her expedition, her final warnings, and the strange, low hum that filled the tunnels before the collapse. Experts tried to explain the phenomenon: magnetic resonance, seismic activity, even hallucinations caused by low-frequency sound waves. But none could explain the symbol, the circle with a slit, that began appearing in caves, mines, and construction sites across Europe, carved freshly into walls where no one had entered before. Today, those tunnels remain sealed. No official maps mark their existence. Yet every few years, new sinkholes open unexpectedly across the continent, always along the same mysterious underground path that Helena mapped. Locals say the air near those places feels wrong, heavier, colder, alive. And sometimes, on quiet nights, villagers swear they can hear it again, that slow, deliberate rhythm. A pulse beneath the ground, moving closer. Perhaps it was never just tunnels. Perhaps it was a prison. And perhaps, whatever they sealed away 10,000 years ago is remembering how to crawl back to the surface.